Welcome to the Career Coffee Chat podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Urban, certified career strategist and executive coach, removing career roadblocks so you can achieve more impact, influence, and income. Welcome to Career Coffee Chat Live. I'm your host, Aaron Urban, and I'm so thrilled to see you all today. So as you tune in, come on in, pull up a chair. I would love to talk to you today about finding your purpose in life. Now, what's really interesting is I feel like this moment in time particularly, we're all looking a little bit deeper than perhaps we have in previous years. Now, what's really interesting is while we are living in, you might think, unprecedented times, at about 20 years into every century, our socioeconomic cycle goes through tumultuous change. What's very different about this cycle is that people are looking inward more than ever. So if you're feeling misaligned, bored, burned out, or stuck, chances are you might not be aligned with your life's purpose, and therefore perhaps even struggling to prosper. So if this feels like you're in the right space, so come on in. I'd love to welcome you to the show today so you can understand how to connect with that core purpose that lives inside of you. Because my friends, we all have these gifts and talents. So if this resonates with you, please don't be shy. Say hi from wherever you are tuning in from, either now or if you're listening to the replay. We'd love to hear from you. Now, don't forget, Career Coffee Chat is also a podcast available on all the major channels. So I'd love to hear from you there as well. Give us a star rating or thumbs up or what have you on your favorite channel. And I'd love to welcome you to the show because I want to help you, my friends, unleash your inner brilliance. It's great to see you today. Hey, some Theritha, I probably mispronounced that, and I got that gift from my grandfather. I'm glad to see you today. I'm glad you like the subject. And, here's the thing. It's not just me talking here today. We have a wonderful guest to help you tap into your purpose and passion and potential to prosper. And yes, I like alliteration. And that wonderful guest is McCourt. We'll chat about the meaning of purpose. What is purpose anyway? And what does that mean for your life? And what happens if you're not in alignment with that purpose? So if you're interested in learning how to leverage your purpose and to thrive, both personally and professionally, you're in the right place. So let's talk a little bit about Catherine, our special guest today. She is a transformational business and personal coach. So she does all the things. She helps you find your purpose, no matter if you are a professional, a leader, an entrepreneur. She helps you connect with that core sense of yourself. And she focuses her coaching on empowering individuals, entrepreneurs, businesses to lead with purpose, to prosper. We all want to prosper more, right? Her holistic approach to sustainable change has led through many breakthroughs and a new, fulfilling, inspiring path forward for her clients. She believes clarity around purpose is a foundation to all successful journeys. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Catherine. It's so great to have you on the show today, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Aaron. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So let's see. Theritha says, my current startup, I have to work around 14 to 15 hours. Oh, gosh, I hear you. That was certainly me as well when I was starting up my business. And I'm complete burnout. I sometimes feel like what I'm doing is just wondering, with my mind. And I'm only 27. You're too young to feel like this. But what's interesting to hear this is now I feel like, when I was 27, I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. Actually, I'm still figuring out what I want to be when I grow up. But that's too young to feel burned out, we think. But we're hearing more and more of this. So you're not alone, unfortunately. Now, more and more people are just working their blood, sweat, and tears. And if you're not aligned with what you truly want to do, that can certainly lead to burnout. Now, Catherine, does that resonate with you? Is that why you got into doing this sort of business, or what was a catalyst for you?
Yeah, well, it happened around that same age. So like this audience member around, 27, 28, 29, kind of that period, I think is when I really decided to take a real deep look into what was driving me, what were my intentions. I think I've learned over the years about myself more and more that even early on, I always was looking for intention. whether it was within myself of things that I was doing or wanting to have intention towards the things that I was doing. But also, why are others making certain decisions and choices or landing in certain places? Where was the intention behind it? Or did they land there because they didn't have intention? And so I think that's kind of was the awakening for me when I was around, I would say 28 years old or 29 years old, and realizing that I was living with intention because I was always very career driven and wanted to follow a path of marketing, sales, and business development. That's been my background for the last 20 years. But I had been laid off of a company that I really enjoyed working there. It was a technology company. So learning about, futuristic things was really exciting to me.
All right.
But I also realized that when I started to look for new work, I was getting burnt out just looking for new work because nothing excited me. It didn't feel like it aligned with the things that I wanted. Fast forward, 5 years from then, and I suffered a massive burnout. Yes, and it was with a company that I absolutely loved and a company that I stayed with for 11 years. Believe it or not, I never thought I'd be with one brand for 11 years, but they had all of the components around what aligned with my values and what I felt was purpose, which is why I stayed. But the burnout part, I had to dive in and really start wondering, what is it that's burning me out and why is this happening? Because I still love the company. So we can dive into a little more of that in our conversation.
Yeah.
But I would say, burnout can happen early on. And you're right, Aaron, I've been seeing it too. People who are, late 20s, early 30s, and they already feel like they've run the race.
Yeah.
They're, not sure that this is what they want to do anymore. And they want to get off the hamster wheel.
Absolutely. And I think it's not just, I think that's broad spectrum. And interesting, yesterday, I had a contractor come by on my home. I have some trees that need to be trimmed away from the roof and that sort of thing. And we were talking about it. When you're an entrepreneur, and some Sarissa, you might be able to relate to that. When you're an entrepreneur, you feel like you don't really have an off switch. When I was working in corporations, even as a coach and consultant there, I had an off switch. When I logged out and I was done for the day, I was done for the day. And I was not mentally still logged back in. But because we're still mentally logged back in, this is a constant thing for us. Maybe we're doing our bookkeeping after dinner at night. Maybe we're taking calls until almost bedtime. Or maybe we're still working on the administrative side of things outside of the quote unquote work day. You're still working. You're working more than usual. So having that balance is so incredibly important. And I told the contractor, I said, go up on your rates. You'll make just as much money and half the work. And he's like, I never thought about that. I was like, yes, that's one of the biggest mistakes entrepreneurs make.
Yes.
Sometimes it's not just that simple. Understanding, am I really showing up in a space that it aligns with my core strengths? Right? Yeah. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I would also, just to this point, for this individual saying that they're an entrepreneur and working those extra hours, yes, it's about setting boundaries. But the truth is, when you start out your own business, you are wearing all the hats. And so you may have started out from that purpose piece or that alignment with, what it is that you're looking for to fulfill you. But once you get in there and you're wearing all the hats, that starts chipping away at it. So I know a lot of entrepreneurs that start out thinking, I'm not going to spend extra money to hire in some help. But the truth is that can catapult your business fairly quickly. If you start positioning the right people to support you in those areas that are what's causing the exhaustion. It's not just the hours you put in, because I'm a big believer that when you are doing something with purpose and fulfillment, you can do it ad nauseum. So you might get tired, but it's not the same exhaustion that you feel when you've burnt yourself out.
Right, exactly. I want to say hi to Patrick. This is Patrick right here. I had to log on to my LinkedIn to see because sometimes it doesn't come through our
Hi,
provider
Patrick.
here. So Patrick says hi, good to see you. And Mariama's tuning in from YouTube. Great to see you too. So let me know, those of you who are either tuning in now or later, what do you feel like might be misaligned in your life and what's showing up? Of course, we've heard from some Tharitha that, yeah, I'm a startup. I'm working all these hours. I'm burned out. Yeah, and like you just mentioned, rightly so, Catherine, sometimes we find ourselves trying to do all the things when we really need to outsource some of these things. And where can we do that? I know the first thing I did was hire a CPA. Bookkeeping's not my jam.
Yes. Yes.
I get no joy from that,
Yes. And for most creatives, most people that are entrepreneurs, they're very creative minds, and they are the creator. They're not the administrator. Unless what you're starting is administrative and that's what you thrive on, that's different. But for the most part, if you're the visionary, the administrative tasks are usually the first that you should start considering to delegate. Absolutely.
That's right. And even if you are a CPA, like my contractor who's a CPA, his strong point's not marketing.
Right.
Right. So knowing what your strengths are. So would you say, Catherine, what would be like that first baby step someone could take when they're thinking about, gosh, I don't know what my purpose is. I feel misaligned. Maybe I'm burned out. Maybe I'm stressed out. Maybe I'm just exhausted. Whatever's going on. What maybe that first baby step that they could take might be?
Yeah. So purpose is really living with your value, like living in alignment with values and beliefs, but it's also an impact and a mission that you should feel you're on or contributing to. But to simplify it, when first considering how do I tap into my purpose, is something as simple as looking at your interest. Because values, sometimes if you ask someone, what are your true values? Sometimes people think they know what their values are. We think innately we just live by them. But when you really sit down and think about them, they sometimes can take a while to really percolate and figure out what they are. So I would say just your interests, like what truly interests you? What do you notice that you're reading about? What do you notice that you default to maybe when you're watching the news? Like what stories excite you?
Almost none.
I was going to say the news is not great right now, so maybe that's not a good example. But certainly looking at your interests from if you have any free time, what do you default to? So a lot of our society is afraid to take time to themselves. They feel guilty to take space. But I recommend it to all my clients is find a bit of space in your life, no matter how long it is, whether it's 5 minutes to an hour sometimes for some, but see what you default to. Where do your interests go? Do you go and build something or create something? Do you like reading and informing yourself? Gaining knowledge? Knowledge is power, right? So what you're trying to do is figure out what innately your body or your mind defaults to. So I would say that's like the first real baby step. And then you can dive in a little deeper. So how I coach around purpose is 3 main things, which is passion, which is the emotion that you get from doing the things that you love. The purpose, which is why. So the why behind it. Why do you love doing it? And why do you think it brings you maybe joy, fulfillment? And then soul purpose, which is how we naturally work and our minds work and our own physical being, how we function in the world and how we best work, because everyone works differently.
Right.
And that is
Patrick mentioned here, play to your strengths and delegate others to the areas that drain you. So being aware, like what gives you energy, and even in your workplace, like what are you doing? Like some things you're like, oh, that's terrible, it sucks, and you put it off to the last minute, and then you never get to it, or you're struggling to do it at the last moment. But what do you like to do and you get done first, or what do you gravitate towards first? And it's not just what you are having to do, like the 5,000 Zoom meetings in a day, not just that, but what what interests you? And if maybe it's in a project, maybe it's not all of the project, perhaps it's components of that project, and really becoming aware of those tiny moments or tiny bits of energy that you're getting from certain actions. And then being aware of, what am I doing that's truly draining me? Like if I have to do a presentation, oh, it's so exhausting. Or if I have to do the same thing over and over and over again, I'll just lose my mind, right? What are those things? And that starts to give you kind of that 360-degree view of who you are. But to your point, aligning that also with your values can take some deeper work.
Yes.
Because you're right. We think we know. Oh, sure, I know what my values are. And then we really need to articulate them. And we're like,
Yes. If you give someone a list of values, let's say 25, and ask them to break it down to 10, it's very difficult.
It is.
And then you have to ask them to break it down to 5 and then 3. It gets challenging. And that's my point is like, yeah, we all live by some sense of value, I would think, in our life. But when you really think about the true core values of who you are and what you believe and how you want to be in this world, is really what I'm talking about, not just the everyday that we feel we're living some value. So
yeah, we're talking about non-negotiable values. And people are like, what's a negotiable value? You know, like telling the truth, that's a value. Unless your best friend or your spouse asks you how they look in something. And then all of a sudden it becomes negotiable.
Right. Yes. Yes, totally. And I mean, I want to go back to Patrick's point here about just, delegating some of the tasks that don't necessarily resonate with the work that you want to do. I mean, don't be fooled. Finding your purpose doesn't mean that you will find the job and you'll love it 100% and 100% of the time. There's always going to be a percentage of things that we all have to do in our work or our job that don't maybe fulfill that true purpose part, but it's just a necessity. So when I do the coaching for purpose specifically and around career, it's about recognizing that 80-20 rule, right? The Pareto rule. For most things in business these days, you hear that. Most people probably have heard of this, which is that 80-20 rule. So if 80% of your role is something that you really do enjoy and get fulfillment from and love, then it's okay. There probably could be a 20%, hopefully a bit less, but 20%. I'll give you an example. I've been in sales and business development throughout my whole career. I'm not an Excel guru. And I'm sure if anyone that knows me is listening to this is probably chuckling because they know me in Excel. I love Excel for the analytical part and the reporting, but I don't like to do it. I don't want to populate it. I don't want to fulfill the formulas. But that's a part of sales and business development that, a skill set that you need to know. So that would be an example. Sales and business development is what I love. It aligns with a lot of my purpose in educating people around, valuable products and services. But the administrative task of Excel doesn't necessarily sit in my wheelhouse.
Yeah. Pretty much all of Excel doesn't sit in my wheelhouse.
Okay. Yes.
Once a year, I have to make a pivot table, and I'm always asking my husband, who's an engineer, honey, I need to make a pivot. And he's like, really? I showed you this last year. I was like, yes, I know.
Yes.
My brain went, I not remember it because it's like, unimportant. No, Jose, it's great to see you. So for those of you tuning in now, or whether you're listening to the replay, think about some of the things Catherine pointed out was really, really on point. Like, what interests you? What do you gravitate towards? And chances are most of us have some sort of hobby. And if you don't, because you don't work too much, well, connect with one of us because we'll help you with that. Having a sense of self outside of work is really important. If you say work is my hobby because I love it so much, well, that's awesome. What parts of it do you gravitate towards the most? And if work is not your hobby, then maybe paying attention to what aspects of your work life do you enjoy the most, and become aware of what drains you, because that allows you then, when you're thinking about your trajectory in your life and your career, what situations, circumstances, projects, perhaps to, not volunteer for.
Yes.
And then, you mentioned something though a minute ago, Catherine, that was really poignant because, or at least for me as an entrepreneur, it was like, wow, when you're super passionate about something, you can work at it for like be involved in it, focused on it for hours, and it doesn't feel like it's that big of a deal, which is a double-edged sword.
Yes.
Yes. So that's important to note. So what would you say to those people either tuning in now or later? If you're really passionate about something, you love it so much, we think that's good, right?
Yes.
And when can I get off the tracks?
Sure. So, I mean, you can burn yourself out just, even doing something that you absolutely love. And when you're creating something, I know I've been guilty of it, certainly. And I would say that it's still keeping in mind, there's part of my program that we work through about, the impact that you have on your business, the impact that you have in your relationships, but the impact you have on you. And so how do you want those three things to play out in your life? So you don't, even though you love your work and you're passionate about it, and it's something that drives you, your motivation, your inspiration, you don't want to do that 100% of the time, all the time. You want to start engaging those relationships, whether they're personal or business as well. So it could be both. But then the impact on you is if you run the tank empty, how are you going to keep this business impact going? So you have to fuel yourself in order to feed the other two. So
what, you mean you shouldn't be a slave to a hustle and grind culture or your own well-being? What is that? No. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, totally.
You can't pour from an empty cup. I mean,
no. I mean, there's a reason, like if you recognize top executives in organizations, yes, they are busy. Yes, they have a ton of responsibility. But they have gotten themselves in these positions where things are delegated. So for example, the CEO doesn't read every single email. They're likely on email twice a day, maybe 3 times a day. I'm just speculating on, making a general assumption here, but that would be an example of, people who are still running the ship and some of them very big ships. But they are managing their time and their energy specifically around the things that impact the business, impact the relationships, and impact themselves. Yeah. So they're setting the boundaries, right? You do still, even though you love what you're doing, you're trying to get it off the ground, especially because you think, if I'm not working on it, who's going to get it off the ground? But you have to fuel yourself and give back to yourself in order for you to give back to your business or to keep driving the business.
And, please, for those of you tuning in now or later, don't get derailed by thinking, oh, well, this is just a season. It will pass. That kind of thinking can get us into trouble, because if we're not continually, intentionally setting those boundaries that we're giving back to ourselves, whether it's doing something we love to do, giving that energy back, or taking a break, or what have you, then chances are your performance, your product, all of that will suffer even in the interim. So just keep that in mind. And Hussein has a really good question here. How can the path be modified when the prediction is wrong and the purpose is diverted from its path? By the way, Hussein asked very intriguing questions.
Yes. That's it. For an early morning, I'm like,
I know, wait a minute. You're asking me to think. Yes. Is it possible to change the purpose in the middle of the road if there's a better and faster path?
Yes, because I believe that purpose really is the foundational piece. So I'll give you an example. I'll use myself as an example. So my purpose is empowering others to lead with purpose to prosper. But I can do that in so many different ways. So it's more how you emulate it, how you share it to the world. How are you putting out the purpose? So as a coach, I coach individuals and groups. That's one way that I express my purpose. But I'm also a podcast host where I share tools and tips. And then I also have my business coaching / consulting, where I'm also bringing that purpose. So I can change the elements of how I'm expressing it, but the foundational purpose piece generally stays the same. meaning that mission or that impact that you're trying to have
Mhm.
generally stays the same, but you might just want to express it
Express it differently. Right.
if that
Exactly.
helps
Mhm.
simplify.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I personally, now other people may disagree with this, and that's fine because everybody's
Mhm.
different, right? I mean, not everyone follows the same evolutionary cycle as they evolve as a
Right.
human being. But I feel like more you learn and evolve and put into yourself, and as you evolve as a person, that purpose and how it's expressed or delivered to the world will shift.
Mhm.
And it should.
Yes.
Because if we remain the static machine, I would argue to say that we're probably not necessarily growing. So for something to find out, oh, I'm doing this thing this way, this is a process or method by which I do this thing or deliver my purpose to the world, the outcome I want to have or impact. And then halfway through, we are like, if I do this over here, I'll have a lot more impact and I'll be able to maybe target specific demographic that I really have more interest in, maybe it's children, really have a passion for helping children be literate or whatever, right? Whatever that
Mhm.
thing is. And if I find a different way of doing that, maybe I'll create a program, right?
Yes.
Then that's great.
Yes. I
That's
always say that
yeah.
purpose isn't one dimensional. So
Hmm.
meaning it's not like this one thing that you go out and find, like it will evolve, like to your point,
Right.
Erin, through our life, we evolve as humans. That is what we do. We are meant to evolve.
Mhm.
And your purpose can evolve and change. But it usually the foundational piece will come from that soul purpose part, certainly, and those passions that you have. Some people might think they have two purposes, but when they really dive deep in, they recognize that there's similarities or there's synergy into the two things that they want to do that are similar to what they want to actually express.
Mhm.
So yes, purpose is not one dimensional. It'll evolve, but it has to start from somewhere. And
Right.
starting from that one foundational piece will then create probably room for you to keep growing
Mhm.
it. It'll mold in different ways, look a little differently depending on how you're expressing it.
Right.
So don't
So
hold
yeah,
yourself to one
yeah.
key
I mean,
thing and
one
think, oh
process.
no, I've started this. I have to stick to this. Yeah.
Right.
No, you can
Never
grow
change.
and evolve it.
Yeah, yeah. So he asked, does that mean principles cannot be changed? But we can find a better style to do so. Well, that's a really interesting question because principles
Mhm.
connect very strongly to values, so core values like
Yes.
this is my belief system and what I hold dear to. Um, I'm not saying that core values cannot change
Hmm.
because I would be misspeaking if I said that. There can be instances in an individual's life where a core value is challenged, or maybe a limiting belief has caused a certain value to express itself in a way
Hmm.
that may
Yes.
shift over time. By and large, though, for the most part, one's values remain the same throughout one's life, for the most part. But it's not absolutely like set in concrete, if you will. So let's just say someone identifies early on in our coaching that a core value to them is, I don't know, family. Family, growing family. That's a core value. I don't think that's really a value, but it's something like
Hmm.
that. And then later on, they find, well, no, it's not really family. It's nurturing loved ones. So it's a nuance
Yes.
of the thing. Or perhaps someone identifies, and this sometimes happens when someone's like, no, providing a stable income or making a lot of money is my value. And then later on, they realize, well, no, it's not really how much money I make. It's just having financial security.
Right. Yes.
And that's not really
Yes.
a value. That's more of it's a guiding principle, if you will. The values
Yes.
are more deeper than that. We're
Yes.
not saying they can't be changed. What do you think, Catherine?
I think through our life, they will change at a certain extent, meaning from a very young age, when you start
Mm-hmm.
recognizing what some of your values might be, they might ebb and flow a bit, especially in your 20s, right? That's the exploratory stage of our life. And when we are getting to know ourselves and getting to know others in different ways. And I think your values could slightly change from then, but usually you'll see, like to your point, Erin, about the principle of it might just look differently than what you set as your core value, I think is right. So it might just evolve and look a little differently. But if you really, again, go down back to that root reason that maybe you chose that value or that principle, likely that hasn't changed for you, like what you're really trying to drive from it.
Right.
Yeah.
Now let's talk a little bit, if you don't mind, what happens when someone isn't living to their core values, not that they are misaligned, they're not truly connecting with their purpose. And to be fair, a lot of people think that they have connected to their purpose, but that purpose is actually not driven by them. The purpose is driven by either meeting society's expectations, familial expectations, maybe a limiting belief is pushing someone away for something their true purpose is, but they're afraid for whatever reason to engage with that purpose. So they're living for a purpose, but the purpose isn't theirs.
Yes.
Or they just don't have a purpose. So what do we see when this happens? So maybe tackle one of those, maybe not both of them at the same time.
Yeah.
It's totally different. Yeah.
Well, part of what I share with individuals certainly is around what happens when you're not living with purpose and when you're not aligned with it. And a lot of times it's things that we don't recognize, like maybe we are doing things that aren't as healthy for ourselves. We might not feel like if you're someone who's like, oh, these things always happen to me, that's a sign to like maybe, take a step back and say, okay, what are these things that I say always could keep happening to me? There's something in that you are either enabling or you are, and I'm saying potentially, so potentially enabling something or potentially allowing yourself to be drawn or driven by, like you mentioned, society, maybe pressures, family pressures, but it doesn't sit well with you. And the reason you're saying to yourself that, oh, this always happens to me in more of a negative tone is because it doesn't sit right with you. There's something obviously about it that's not sitting right with you. So I think if you can start recognizing areas in your life where it doesn't feel great, or you're begrudgingly doing things and you find that you're doing them often, or that they happen, throughout your life and you're always coming up with that more of a negative tone towards it. Those are the things to pay attention to and see, where is that coming from? Is it because you don't agree with it? Is it because you're doing it begrudgingly because you don't really believe in it, or you don't really want to do it? Something as simple as, if you don't want to do something, why don't you want to do it? The why piece is the real important thing here.
Asking why and following to that root cause is really important. And language is, particularly when you're coaching, what we call neurolinguistics. So the power of language and the words we choose is a great way to start to identify what might be going on underneath the surface, because most of the time we're operating on automatic. Whether you like it or not, that's what we do, is we operate on automatic. Yes. And so these words, these repeated phrases or repeated maybe mental narratives are kind of a gateway to understanding what might be going on in that automatic world that we're not necessarily consciously engaging, that gives us, insight into the narrative that might be holding us back, or that we feel like we might feel like we have to or should. Are we shoulding ourselves? We've heard about that. Like, are we doing something we feel like we should do, but we don't necessarily personally, like, it doesn't align here? I know that those people who are working in organizations that really, truly love, and we hear this a lot in Houston, Texas, love the environment. I'm working for big, bad oil and gas, right? Okay. So that can be a values misalignment that will cause a lot of problems, and these people struggle with it because, well, what can I do inside this company that helps it be less toxic, right? Or what have you.
Right.
So it may be something like that. or it'd be more obvious. My parents wanted me to become an accountant or a
Yes.
doctor. If you knew how many doctors hated doing what they do, you would ask very different questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
I work a lot with reframing, as I'm sure you do too, Erin, is helping people, like to your point, is the language we speak to ourselves. And it's something as simple as, when you're at work, and if there are tasks like we were talking before about, there's always tasks that you're going to have to do that don't align with maybe how you flow, or when you're in the zone and they just feel uncomfortable, but you have to do them. How can you reframe your energy around attempting to do that task, or when you're approaching that task? Because sometimes it's just an energy shift and a reframe in what you're telling yourself before you do it that will absolutely shift how you get into it and how you accomplish it or complete it. So if you're constantly telling yourself, like I'll bring up the reporting thing again, is like, oh my God, it's report time, like I got to dive in. And if I'm saying all these things like I hate reporting, or I hate Excel, or I hate whatever, that energy makes it worse. So just like for the audience, just in like as a simple example, is like, try and pay attention to the energy you're bringing, even the body language. What are you telling yourself before you tackle those tasks that you don't love? Because if you can just spin it in a more positive way, like, if I get through this, I'm going to be able to go and play outside with my kids earlier than normal. Try and find something that makes it more positive, and chances are you'll have a very different experience with it.
Right. I mean, it's really interesting you mentioned that, because July of this year, I retired from work.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah. Now I only do fun.
Okay. Awesome.
So I retired work, and I try not to use the word WORK as much as possible because of the connotation it has for me mentally and physically. I was noticing that when I said the word work, like my shoulders would try to meet my ears, and you feel that tension because the connotation or the symbolism work has for me in my brain. So just think about that, for those of you tuning in now or later. When something is in misalignment, is it a misalignment because of your core values, or is it in a misalignment because of the connotation we have around the thing? Sometimes it may not be a direct violation of who we are in this world. It might just simply be we have a wrong mindset about it, or maybe we're not using the language that's supporting ourselves to deal with whatever it is. So now I don't work. I have fun in my business. I'm working. That takes a lot of reprogram. So Hussein has another question. That's awesome. Thank you, Hussein. Are there external values which use of the organization and internal values which use inside the organization? So it almost sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, Hussein, you're asking if there's situational values. So values you would have for your personal life and values you would have for your professional life. Now, it's really interesting. We kind of had a conversation around that faux separation before we started the live show today. What do you think, Catherine?
Yeah, I'm kind of stumped on this one, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know about that. So let me have a go at it, and then I'll let you marinate on it for a second.
Sure.
So, situational values, maybe not. The values are intrinsic to who you are as a person. Situational personas, so how you exhibit your behavior slightly differently, yes, that does exist. Everybody has situational personas. So let's just say you're more of an introverted person, more reserved, and you need to give a board presentation. Chances are you'll have a persona for that thing. In home life, you probably wouldn't exhibit the same behaviors talking to your husband or your wife or your significant other. Okay, that's probably not the persona. And you probably have a persona talking to your pets. For those of us in America, particularly, we always, look who's such a cute baby face, or whatever, right?
Yes.
Yeah. No, we never talk to our boss like that. Oh, is she feeling cranky today? We wouldn't do that, right?
Right. Yes.
But the values are kind of core to who we are. So I wouldn't say that we're like shifting. We're going to have a different set of values today, unless we've got a serious misalignment and coming up with a lot of reasons why we need to put up with the situation. What do you think, Catherine?
I think in situational or in situations like possibly what you're describing is, there are some people that go to work and it's not aligning with their values, but they feel like, maybe it's a really good job. It supports a certain lifestyle. It provides them with key benefits that they need. And so it's not that they switch their values, but what you need to do in that sense, I would say, is it's not about switching your values and trying to marriage your values with the organization that you're working within, or you having to feel like you have to compromise your values. It's getting more to the micro level of your role. And are your values allowing you to create the impact that you want to create from your role standpoint? So forget about the bigger organization. I mean, you are there to contribute to the bigger picture. But if you can find some sense of alignment of your values within your role and how that creates impact, and if it's impact that you feel good about, then I would say that is still a key piece to recognize to feel fulfilled in your role. Because a lot of times, right now businesses are all about making sure that employees, I say all businesses, but it's certainly with the pandemic, workforce has changed a lot. And we also have 3 different generations in the workforce. And the younger generations really care about that purpose piece or what is driving the business. So their values, they want to see their values in the organization. Whereas a lot of older organizations are taking their value, their philosophies, and they're pulling it down to help the employees find purpose in it. Right. So you've got this like one coming from the bottom, one coming from the top. But so I would say if you're somebody who feels like, do I need to think about or rethink my values and what I'm doing? Maybe you do. But if you feel like you're comfortable and know that your true values, do they come into play or do they have a presence in the role that you're doing at least? And don't worry about the big organization until you can filter through some of that.
And your body, that makes total sense. And your body will let you know too.
Yes.
Well. So for those of you, who's saying, and for others of you tuning in right now, and for those of you tuning in later as well, let me know if this resonates with you, because when you feel a direct violation of your core principles, let's say your core values, you will be a visceral response. You'll know. You won't be room for doubt about it, because you'll be like, no, like that's what? You'll instantly offended. It's an automatic response. And then you think through it. So you'll know. But let me know if that resonates with you, or if that's ever happened to you. Or if you find like you're having to fight through that every day now, chances are you're in the wrong place. Just being honest. Now, I will also say that you're right in that the generations coming into the workforce now, that social responsibility component is much, much higher, much more forefront, top of mind. So for them to decouple what the organization's impact is and then their impact within the organization is a little bit more difficult, because they see more of a global, they're more of a global mindset. It is important to know, like, okay, what is an absolute compromise and you won't put up with, and what is not? Because at the end of the day, the businesses are in business to make money.
Yes.
Right? That's why they have business, and they can
every business
because they make money. So so take this for example. One of my clients, she's a wildly successful health, safety, and environmental professional, HSE. And so what she does, her role is wonderful and really important, but she works for a petrochemical company who's really dirty and there's a lot of violations. I mean, so what her role is in total alignment with what she believes in, and the company she's working for, maybe not so much. Right?
Yes.
So you can see where that may be very interesting, but she knows that by what she's doing is helping the company operate more safely, operate cleaner, right? Have those processes in place and making sure the reporting is done correctly and making sure there aren't violations and these sorts of things going on, and elevating that to the right stakeholders so changes can be made, so projects can be put in place to make things operate cleaner. So she is having a positive impact in that way. Mm-hmm. She knows that, Rome wasn't conquered in a day, or built in a day either. So it's a process.
Yes.
Just keeping this in mind, being realistic about, okay, am I still in alignment with what I'm personally doing? Because there's a lot of things we can't control.
Exactly. Look, every company I mentioned early on in our conversation, so for any of the audience that joined midway, is, I was with a company for a very long time that absolutely aligned with some values that I had around sustainability and the environment and all that. But I certainly experienced a burnout during it. I had to realign myself with what I was doing there, which, I ended up in 3 different roles within the organization over the period of time that I was with them, because I had to continue to evolve and also make sure that what I was delivering, my impact from the role that I had, was coming from a place of that fulfilled me and my values and my purpose, versus just doing the job because I liked the company. So I think that what you're delivering in your role, think about that. And that's such a good place to start, to figure out if you should remain long-term with an organization, or is it time to really start digging in a little deeper and figuring out where, you can create an even greater impact with a company that's more aligned with you, if that's a decision you're ready to make.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because before we wrap up the show, I certainly want to mention, one of the other aspects about what may happen if we don't connect to that purpose and the passion and what, basically what interests you, how you can leverage your expertise, your strengths, your gifts, your talent, and what drives you, your core sense of self. And we do shift, which we've seen a lot of, with the Great Resignation, a lot of people hopping jobs and moving companies. And we've heard about this term called boomerangers. Left the job, and they find out, oh, this is not working out, and the grass is not necessarily greener, or maybe I brought my old baggage, or we're not seeing a difference. And they didn't do their introspection. They really didn't do that discovery they needed to do to understand who they truly were before they hopped.
Yes.
And that's a massive, massive gap that a lot of people don't even think about. They're like, oh, new job, it'll be better. Maybe it wasn't necessarily what they were doing.
Yes.
That's the problem.
Yes. So I love that you brought up that point, Erin, because I recently had been coaching with someone who specifically to this point is like, it's way easier to figure out whether this company is right or wrong for you while you're there than just jump ship and go somewhere else thinking that it's going to be better based on some other things that you see in a job description.
Right.
Right. So do while you're employed and while you're, I'll say security, but while you're there, if things aren't working out, take that time while you're there to really start assessing that value part, the impact you have in your role. Can you develop with the organization to bring more of your impact throughout the business in a different way? And if you've kind of exhausted some of those areas, then maybe it's time to start assessing whether or not other organizations might be better suited. Right. But do the work while you're there, and don't make any rash decisions, because it's easier to do it with people that you're already integrated with, right?
Right. I mean, if it's a toxic work environment,
yes. Get out.
You really don't see an avenue, and you've done what you can, and went to whatever support group was HR. Sometimes people feel comfortable, they can help, others not, or maybe a boss's boss, or someone else in another business. You explored your avenues, and that's just not working out. And you need to get out. Then get out, yes, because toxicity, negativity, just people don't quit what they do. They usually quit their bosses.
Yes,
typically.
I've heard that.
Which is one reason why I do what I do and help leaders, express themselves as the leaders they truly can be versus not.
Yes.
And causing a lot of attrition and retention problems and, talent not being utilized. But anyway.
Finish your point.
No, go ahead.
This just popped up for me too, around like some of the people I've recently coached as well, is just around recognizing that sometimes people see an organization and they see all the positions that exist in the organization. They're wanting to make a move or they're wanting to develop their career. They don't necessarily see that a position is open, but I would encourage people to start having open conversation about what you want to create within an organization, because if you are an employee who is encouraged to stay with the organization, that's already half the organization's battle, is keeping people. So you're a voice that's already worked with them. You know the culture. If you have a new position that you think you could create, or an enhanced position for another department or whatever it is, but if you feel like there's something that you want to do within the organization that you don't see exists, I encourage you to have a voice, share it with your leaders, because sometimes leaders, they're so busy, they're integrated into the day-to-day business. Maybe they haven't considered how important adding someone in this type of capacity could impact the business. So I encourage you to not be shy and voice if you think you could make an impact in that business in some different way that you don't see exists. Potentially a business might support you in creating it.
Yes. And actually right now, for those of you tuning in live today, we're in the fall time of this year. So right now in the fall is the best time to have these types of conversations. When you are going to have this type of conversation, you know, okay, these gifts, these talents, these expertise, I can leverage this way and I can make a huge improvement here for the business. You have a business case, how that adds value. I recommend having that business case and talking to key stakeholders and decision makers who would help you maybe make that a reality. Now's a great time. People are creating budgets, particularly in the fall, for the coming year. So It's a fantastic time to have these types of conversations. That's how I got my leadership position. I actually applied for a job I knew I wouldn't get within the organization because it was several pay grades above mine. It was a COO. Clearly, nice. I was getting that and didn't want it, by the way. But I did want the ear of decision makers. So I took a risk. I went out there, put myself out there. And when the CEO, it was a smaller, mid-sized organization, for the COO position, you're going to interview with the CEO. So he politely basically asked me, why did you apply for this job? I said, well, it's not that I feel like I'm the best fit. And the eyebrow went up. I was like, however, there's a really good reason why I applied for this job, and it's not a waste of time. This is why. And I told him, what, you only know me for what I do on a daily basis.
Yes.
Perhaps you're not aware of all the other talents and skills I can bring to the company to add, and then I proceeded to, he was like, oh, really? Do tell me more. So then I told him what value I could add to the organization. This was really, really passionate about it. They created a job.
Yes. Yeah. The other thing that it will tell you is if they don't, then, that just gives you more tools and information to see if a move is the change that you need or something you have to explore. But I recommend, explore where you're at. If there's components about that business that you enjoy, if you enjoy the culture and your team, and it's just the role that's not working for you, and you don't see something available, voice what it is that you want to make the impact on for that business. And hopefully the leaders will listen and have the opportunity and the budget to support you in creating something.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Well, Catherine, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show. It's been a great conversation. Thank you so much for being a wonderful guest. Is there anything else you'd like to share with those people either tuning in now or watching the replay or they're listening to the podcast later?
Trust yourself. Get to know yourself. Take the time to give yourself a bit of space to get to know yourself so you can trust yourself and the decisions that you may or may not have to make based on what feels comfortable, what feels good, what will feel like it helps you create challenge, good challenge, meaning, go for something.
Good growth, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Good growth.
Fun growth. We want to have more fun in our lives.
What's the worst? I was going to say, what's the worst people are going to say? They're going to say, no, I'm sorry, we can't. Either no budget or no, we don't see your vision. And that's okay because somebody else will.
Somebody else will. And then they're looking for good talent for sure. So I encourage for all of you out there tuning either now or later or listening to the podcast, take the dive. Look inside, because as we all know, we cannot grow something that we We don't know. So become self-aware. That's the first step towards any innovation and improvement and moving forward in your life. And Catherine, again, it's been such a huge pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much. How can people get in touch with you? Do you have any workshops coming up or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to say thank you so much to you, Erin, for having me as a guest on this show. I was really excited to join. My website is catherinemccourt.com, and on there you can see a workshop page. And I do workshops usually monthly. I have one actually happening this week. So tomorrow, if anyone wants to join, they still can join today. And it's called Ignite Your Soul, the Purpose Workshop. So it is for those looking for more fulfillment, purpose, creating change in their life. Maybe they're burnt out and they need to figure out, what steps they can take. This workshop is great for that. I have on my website, of course, all the coaching services that I have available. And I also do have an online workshop that they can access on the website, which people can do on their own time if they choose, if they can't join a live online one as well. And then Ignite Your Soul, Awaken and Unleash Your Life Purpose is a full program that I work with people through to align purpose in life and career. And that is actually on sale right now. I have a discount for the remainder of the year because pricing will change in the new year. But if people want to check that out, again, it's on catherinemccourt.com. Should I provide my other handles like Instagram?
Sure, you can put those actually in the show notes. So, Catherine,
Okay.
if you want to comment, on LinkedIn, of course, on YouTube,
Yes.
put those in the notes. And that way it makes it super easy for people to get in touch with you. Yeah, this has been a pleasure having you again on the show. Great to see all of you tuning in, my friends, whether you're tuning in now, watching live, or watching the replay, or listening to the podcast. As always, my deepest wish for you is to keep elevating. Until next time, bye for now.
Thanks, Erin.
Thank you for tuning in on the Career Coffee Chat podcast. It's been a pleasure. Feel free to reach out to me. My email is coacheurban@gmail.com or tweet at coacheurban, Instagram coach.eurban, or reach out to my Facebook group, Elevate Your Career. So I'd love to learn more about you, hear your insights, and what questions you have. You can find out more about me at coacheurban.com. And don't forget, please do reach out on LinkedIn. You can find me at Erin Urban. Until next time, cheers. Here's to caffeinating your career.